Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday and welcome to Wake Up America. I'm really excited today because I am with Brandon Johnson and we're going to be having a great conversation. And you guys know the drill. Every week, I bring an entrepreneur onto the hot seat and we take them to the past and we talk about their biggest struggles and challenges and how it was that they were able to overcome them to become the person that they are today. So, Brandon, how are you?
I am doing very, very well this morning, feeling blessed. Thank you so much for having me on your platform. I really appreciate that.
No problem. Guys, when we come back, Brandon is going to introduce himself and we're going to go right to it. Okay, Brandon, thank you so much for jumping on here. Why don't you tell everybody, just introduce yourself, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start with the interview.
Absolutely. Obviously, I'm Brandon Johnson. I'm originally from right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up. I now reside in Los Angeles, California, and I do a few things. My passion and my goal, my focus is working in two ways in entertainment. I work in the entertainment industry doing what's called vocal contracting, music contracting for film and television. I help organizations find music talent for their film and TV projects. Outside of that, I'm also an entrepreneur. I have a t-shirt line called Kingdom Crew, the Kingdom Crew clothing line, and then I'm doing currently doing a podcast as a ministry of my faith with some colleagues of mine called the Kingdom Crew Podcast, which is available on YouTube, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and I'm venturing into other platforms that will all relate to basically ministry. That's probably the thing that I'm becoming most driven about is my faith and sharing my faith.
So you would say that that's your biggest passion.
Definitely, definitely.
Well, I know that you and I had talked previously beforehand, so this was not always so, right? This was not always your passion.
Oh,
Right. So when you were younger, right, when you were younger, what was going on in your life? What would you say was your biggest struggle? And basically, then we'll talk about how it is that you got to where you are today.
right. Yeah, definitely not. So when I was there was just a lot of adversity that I faced as a young kid, really. When I 5, 6 years old. My mom was not in a relationship with my father because he was abusive. They were together for a short period of time, and I had to witness some of that abuse. But thankfully, she was strong and empowered, and eventually left that relationship. But then not too long after that, because now she's a single mother trying to support kids, and so we were there was a time where we stayed with family, friends, and whatnot, trying to kind of get by and make ends meet. And at one point in that, as I was about 6 years old, 5, 6, 7 years old, I was molested by by a female friend of my mother's, and so that gave me a knowledge of things that I wasn't supposed to know at that age. And carrying those things then sent me on this trajectory of looking at pornography, looking at things that I wasn't supposed to, magazines, all different kinds of things that started me on a journey of really becoming a promiscuous young man. First sexual experiences. It's okay to talk about these things. Um,
Absolutely,
okay,
absolutely.
wonderful. First sexual experience was at 9 years old, which is extremely, a young age. And I was a promiscuous teen all through my 20s and early 30s, struggled with addiction to pornography and sexual addiction. And it just carried me on this dark path of chaos and using and abusing women and lying and never really being an honest person that could be trusted and was reliable. I was just, I was living based on my desires, and I just wasn't a good guy.
Yeah, and how would you say that affected your life? Because obviously you were not aware that you were going through a bad trajectory, but
Right.
uh, Yeah, how do you think it affected your life, and how did you feel through all of this?
Well, it was a lot of chaos, to be very honest, to be frank. It was just constantly looking over my shoulders of, when you're lying to a lot of different people at the same time, you're always looking over your shoulder to wonder who's going to catch me in this, who's going to expose, excuse me, I'm sorry, who's going to expose what I'm doing and how I'm living. And you don't know that all of it's bad, of course, but deep down there's something that tugs at you, and it's just never really having any peace. It's never really having any stability. It's always being driven on what you need. It's an addiction like any other, like being addicted to drugs or alcohol. You constantly are spending all of your time looking for a fix, and you're never able to find peace in that.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, usually addiction is because of a sign of something that we are missing inside, and so we're trying to fill that
So
void. What would you say now that you know from experience was that you were trying to fill? What do you think that you were looking for? And then we'll talk about what it is that you have now and how you found your peace.
definitely, definitely self-love. Self-love is probably one of the biggest things, and that for me really came from my relationship with God, because when you don't know yourself, that's one of the biggest ways that you're going to try to find identification from other external things, and that's you're never going to find it there. It's never going to be in your car, it's never going to be in your job, it's never going to be in how much money you have in the bank. And so becoming a man of faith and engaging in relationship with God on a regular basis, I was able to see more about who I really was, because based on my belief system, I'm a Christian, so I follow Jesus Christ. He has shown me the kind of man I am and the kind of man that I'm supposed to be. And so now I walk in that daily, and that roots me in peace and love and stability and wisdom. So I make better decisions, not just for me, but for my family and for people around me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, addiction, and especially porn addiction, is a really big problem now for teens. They say that there's an estimate that already by the age of 8, children have seen pornography. They have been
Hmm.
exposed to pornography in some way.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, because that I feel that your mind is just not prepared for such an experience. I don't think that you're mentally prepared for it. And so I know that it's causing a lot of problems. And approximately like 36% of boys are addicted to pornography.
Hmm.
So, what would your advice be to a child, to a teen that is addicted to pornography, or to a parent that has a child that is addicted to pornography? What would you say to them?
That's a great question. To a younger person, I would say just to be careful. If you're exposed to it, you're exposed to it, and that can already be a dangerous walk for you to make. But you have to be careful, because at a young age, it's going to feel natural, because in a way it is. We're designed to feel arousal and attraction and all infatuation and all of those things. But we're designed to engage in that in a healthy environment with someone we love, someone hopefully we're married to, and where it's a safe space to express yourself in a sexual way. So that would be, I think, my advice to teens is just, even though it feels like it's something you're supposed to do, that can carry you on such a dark path, and just to be careful and know that you don't need those physical things from other people to validate you. God has already validated you. The fact that you're here, the fact that you have air in your lungs and thoughts in your head and things that you want to do, that's your validation. That's why you're important. You're important to me. You're important to Naomi because of those very reasons. And to learn to believe in that, affirm yourself in that God's given you purpose and you're special. To parents, we definitely have to monitor our children's use of these different platforms, social media, YouTube, PlayStation, Netflix, video, and it's not to be overbearing, and it's not to try to restrict them. You want your kids to have fun and enjoy life, but it's just because we love them, we have to be aware. We have to be, I think the key word would be intentional about our engagement with our children and what they're looking at, what they're doing, and know the ins and outs of how they feel about themselves and about the world, so that we can be addressing those issues and it doesn't take them off onto a path that they're not supposed to be on.
Yes, and another thing that I want to point out is that of course we have curiosity, and you're going to this is the age where you are experimenting, and of
Right.
course you're going to be attracted and you're going to want to see these things. But sometimes when you're so young and you haven't had these sexual experiences, you don't understand that what you're watching is not real, and it's really not how a relationship is supposed to be. And I have actually spoken to some parents who daughters have been very disappointed because their first sexual experience was so aggressive and violent, because these young boys are watching these things online and they think that this is how sex is and this is how they have to act, right?
Right.
So I know that you have children. When it comes to this subject, how have you handled it? How do you guys handle this whole social media and pornography and time and basically sex? How do you handle this environment in your home?
Well, first, thank you for your insight there. That's a great insight that you just shared. And for me, it's all conversations, really. It's so much happens in just the conversation. And whether good or bad, I've had the experiences now. What that does is it puts me in a unique position to speak to those issues. And so I just try to be as vulnerable as I possibly can. My son is 18 now, and I've talked to him about, you could say, the dirt that I did when I was a young man, and all the issues that I had, and cheating on girls and cheating on women in my 20s and 30s, and just the struggles and the trials that I faced because of that. And there's something that happens when you're vulnerable, when you're open in that way, to say that I'm not perfect, I've made a lot of mistakes, and even some of the issues that have been caused in his life are because of me. That honesty, I think, helps open the door for people to know that they can trust you, and when they trust you, they open up.
Yes. Okay, it's true.
Yeah.
And so basically, do you uh, do you restrict them? Do you basically talk to them? Do you keep them more involved in other activities? How do you keep a balance so that they don't fall into these, I guess, traps,
Yeah.
these addictions, these patterns that are negative and basically they aren't productive. So how do you
Right.
do that?
Right. Exactly. I think it's all three of what you just said. It's a counterbalance. I think a lot of times, parents have this idea that, well, I want to shield my kids away from everything, and the thing, but it's doing that just in a responsible way. Um, having the conversation, being vulnerable, being open, uh, showing them other things that they can put their time into. I mess with my son a lot, and he's not so big into video games these days, it seems like, but he used to be really, really a huge video game guy, and I always mess with him and say, if you're not planning on, playing in a competition where you can win millions of dollars or becoming a video game designer, all of that time that you spend playing video games is a waste of time. It can be entertaining, but an hour, 2 hours, something like that. But if you're spending entire weekends playing video game, I mean, you just wasted all that time that you could have been investing in yourself. So it's rerouting that attention to something that is equally as enjoyable, but lends itself to being productive. And then in exploring those avenues, you find things that you're more passionate about, but that actually bring something into your life. They bring fulfillment, they bring joy. And that, now he's interested in becoming a general contractor and starting his own general contracting business. And he's a drummer, and he just has all these great gifts and talents. And so we're in the process of exploring to try to figure out exactly where he sees himself headed. And it's just moving him in a, I think, a more powerful, purpose filled direction.
Yes, and but what you said is a great point, and I remember we talked about this before. It's basically if you're just filling time, are you trying to escape from something, or are you trying to do something,
Hmm.
attain something? And once again, it has to do with purposeful living. Sometimes
Right.
We just live our lives. We wake up and we just react to our day, and
Right.
then we don't understand why we're not happy. And this is the real the root of addiction, is when there is no purpose, when there is no aim, when there is no goal. We have nothing to look forward to, so we end up falling into traps, because as humans, we do two things. We're either trying to escape, it's either fear. So
Mm-hmm.
we're running away from something, and we're either running to something, to pleasure, to feeling good. So when we don't have an aim, we don't have a goal, we don't have a vision, we don't have direction, well, guess what we're doing? We're chasing pleasure, and we're just running away from fear. We're running away from everything that feels uncomfortable. And so it becomes a cycle, it becomes a pattern. When you were living this life, and I know that it's a lot of fun, because I mean, who doesn't like to have sex, go out, party, and
Right.
these are things that, of course, are enjoyable. But how is it that your soul feels? Because I've been there. I know the difference. So how is it that your soul felt before, and how is it that you feel now?
Definitely, there's a restriction and a disconnect more than anything. I think that's probably even a better way of looking at it. There's a disconnect. We're soulful beings. We're soul beings. We're soul and spirit primarily, and our bodies are just meant to carry us around. But when you, as the Bible would say, when you live according to the flesh, you're following desires.
Yeah.
And in desire, that's a temporary fulfillment that you really don't have anything long term to feed off of. um, you know, in the Bible, Jesus calls himself the bread of life. So it's this idea that I can feed on this transformation that's taking place in my heart and in my soul, and in Jesus, in Christ, I receive life, real life, that's based on spiritual and soulful things. And so there's this disconnect where you're not really even operating as you truly are. You're operating in a different way. And the difference that I feel now is when I wake up, I feel much more connected to who I truly am on the inside. And everything that I do now is so much more purpose filled, and I just get something richer out of it because I spend a lot of my time trying to love people, understanding people, connecting with people, teaching, leading, sharing. And that's what life is all about. Life is relationships. You know, there's three relationships: our relationship with God, our relationship with ourselves, and our relationship with others. And when you're serving yourself, you're not getting the fullest potential out of your relationships. But when you serve others, you see how everything changes.
Yeah, that's so true. And you said a
Positive.
couple, yeah, you said a couple of things that are really important. And I'm very familiar with the Bible. I've read it many times. I was Jehovah Witness for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I know that text about the flesh, and I really find it interesting, because I believe that this whole experience, we get confused when we're born into this world, right? And we think that this is what we are, that we are our body, but we are so much more than that. And I didn't understand the Bible till my later years. I would say till in the last 5 years that I've been able to say, now I understand what it means when it talks about take the path of pleasure, that take that road, or take the thin little road, like the needle of the camel, whatever. And
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
so small, and you can't really take anything with you. And why is this? Well, because we forget that our experience, we are spiritual beings, we're energy beings, we're soulful beings, like you said. And we get so bogged down with our body, with our sensations, and with experiencing these five sensations, that we forget who we are. And like
Mhm.
you said, this really stems from self awareness. We are born unaware of who we are, and not until we begin to ask ourselves questions and see who we are, and start looking inside instead of looking outside for everything. We look for everything outside, for approval, for fun, for pleasure, for entertainment, for knowledge, but we have to start looking inside. And sometimes this doesn't happen to many of us. I know people in their 70s who still have not been hit with that, who
Struggle,
are
yeah,
not
definitely.
woken up, like we call it, right? So, what was your waking up moment? Why don't you tell us about that, and how it is that you got to where you are now?
It was definitely, I can't take credit for any of that. It was definitely God, God just illuminating my understanding, and it really happened through a sort of an illumination that he gave me, where he showed me this picture of myself, and in the picture I was in this vision, or whatever you want to call it. I was speaking to a mass of people, a group of people, and I was dressed in all white, and there was just something impactful. I was there were no real words, but the idea, the word that came to me was believe. And I don't know what I was saying to the people I was speaking to, but just the word that came to me was believe. And it just it changed everything. I started crying. I cried for about 10 minutes, just bawling my eyes out. And I knew what it felt like was he was showing me a picture of who I was supposed to be. And it convicted my heart and challenged me, because I realized I was nowhere near that person. And once I felt that, I knew that changes needed to be made. And I started to look more at how I was living, how I was treating people. And that was at that point that I started going back to church. And I say going back to church because I grew up in church. My mom was actually a minister. But, at a young age, as a teenager, I wasn't connected to what we were doing in church. I wasn't paying any attention. I was just living however I wanted to. Half of the time, I would sneak out of church services and go to the corner store and get candy and just hang out until church was over. So I started going back to church and really reading the Bible and trying to understand, who is this person, Jesus Christ? Because, if you want an example for a loving individual, nobody's going to represent that better than Jesus would. And so I started to read more about Jesus Christ and understand who he was. And it helped me to show me just how far off that trail I was. And that really started to turn things around.
So was this like a dream? Was this caused by a situation, an affliction? What happened that led you to having this moment?
I was as awake then as I am right now. At least, I hope I'm awake. Um, but yeah, no, I was awake. I forget. I think the day was like December 18th, 2012. So I'm pretty sure that was the exact day. I was actually headed out of town. I was getting ready to do some traveling. So I was, just getting things ready in the morning. And before I was getting ready to make this travel, and it just kind of got hit with this, you could call it a vision or an illumination, just this picture that I knew wasn't really resonating from myself, if that makes sense, because I wasn't even in that headspace. So it kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I'm seeing it unfold. Um, and again, it just had such a weight to it, of like, this is where I'm calling you, and you're not at that place yet. And it just challenged me to look at myself. I think that's a part of it. When you're living with addiction, you're kind of under a veil. You know what I mean? If I could say it that way. And who you really are is disguised, and you're just not connected to where you really should be. And so in that moment, kind of sometimes you just need that, knocking upside the head, that it removed the veil just long enough for me to say, well, who am I really?
Yeah.
And these things that I'm doing, are they, even though they made me feel good, are they helpful to the people around me? Not even to myself, but to people around me. What good am I putting out there? It was enough to wake me up to say, something needs to change, and it needs to change quickly.
Yes. And it's very interesting, self-awareness. Like I was saying before, we're not born with self-awareness. It's something that we have to develop, we have to be taught, or we have to go through, like I always say, through that Kenzo moment, that
Mhm.
suffering, that awakening, that rock bottom for some of us, for us to
Yeah.
say, wow, I really need to change the direction of my life. And basically, what I think is add meaning, because without this, our life is really meaningless.
Mm.
So obviously, you're teaching this to your children, right? Would you say that your children are growing up with a level of self-awareness?
I hope so. I hope so. If I could speak to that idea of, not being self-aware. So, the Bible calls it a sin nature. And I know the word sin is a tough word, and a lot of people don't like that word. If I could just break that down a little bit, sin basically is any and all opposition to the will of God. It's anytime that I'm not being who God designed me to be, that means that I'm sinning essentially, right? So if God designed me to help someone who is homeless or doesn't have food, and I have money in my pocket, but I walk past them and I ignore them and I didn't help them, that's sin. That's the picture of sin. So it's not as horrible a word as people often think it is. It just means I'm not being who God designed me to be. So when uh, we're born with a sin nature because we're disconnected from God. And so by walking in the sin nature, we're more prone to doing things that are against what God designed us for. When we connect with God, now we have an awareness of our true selves, which is that we're meant to be a representative of Him, to love one another, to serve the world, to be lights in the world, not to represent darkness, but to be light, to help, to share with one another. All those really beautiful things. So in that, I'm trying to show my children that as much as I possibly can. Like I said, my son is 18, and he's a great kid. He's a loving kid. So much of that was done, that's between him and God. I can't even take responsibility for that. My daughter, excuse me, my daughter is only 4. So, there's this kind of range. I actually did have a child in between them, but she passed away due to complications from Down syndrome. But my youngest is 4 years old, and she, she's a spitball and a feisty one. So I think that she will be good because she's tough and she's strong, and we're gonna raise her we are raising her to know God, to have a relationship with God, teaching her to pray and to be aware of herself, her body, her personal space, and trying to promote even at this young age, um, doing and finding positive things that fulfill you, but also using those things to help the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what would you have said that you would have needed when you were younger so that you would have developed that self awareness sooner?
Oh, great question. Well, there was the one of the struggles was just not having both of my parents, and in what I saw of my father was just all dysfunction. There was no true representation of love, which is okay. I have never really resented him for that, thank goodness. Even when living with my mom after everything that he had done to her, she never painted a negative picture of her, which was amazing. To I gotta honor her with that. Um, May she rest in peace. They're actually both gone now. I lost my mom at 27 and my
Mm,
father at 32. So I've experienced a lot of loss,
mhm,
which is also very eye opening. But so my father, my experiences with him was all dysfunction, just alcoholism, and being abusive to my mom. With my mom, she was much more loving, but she was only capable of so much. She had her own struggles. And it's important for us to know this. And this is why I say parents have to be honest about where they are and what they struggle with, because you either need to work to try to fill those gaps, and you should do that anyway, but also communicate those things with your kids so your kids can understand, okay, if maybe you can work together as a team in
mhm.
things that you're struggling with, put that together. And how do we create a family unit to fight against the things that would, be considered dysfunctional and that would otherwise tear us apart.
Yes, that's so true. And I know that parents, they do this in a way they think that they're protecting their children.
Hmm.
So you tell your kids everything's okay,
Hmm.
but you're having horrible problems either with your partner or at work or something. But you know what? Children, all of us, we feel things because it's all about energy.
Right.
So you're saying one thing and you're acting another, and then that confuses a child. And not only that, I feel that, like you said, it's a great opportunity to open those lines of communication and to show the child that, although I'm a grown up, this is what's going on and I'm going to make mistakes, but it's okay to make the mistakes. But if you have that line of communication with your children, then that opens up, like you said, that self awareness and it creates that bond. So even if you make the mistakes, you can work on them together. I know you were telling me that this is what you do with your children. So you said about vulnerability. What is it that you did with your children, and how did that open your communication? I remember that initially you were saying that your communication with your son wasn't that great until you did this.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, no, I laid it all out there. I was like, listen, this is where I come from. That I was molested. I struggle with addiction. I, struggle with that desire of watching pornography and lust, these things. And every not necessarily every, but a lot of those struggles and those troubles and things that I did and engaged in when I was young, I just let there. The fact that our in a way, there are things that So I had him from a previous relationship, and so now to see both of his parents, he has to go to different states. That's my fault, because that's a broken relationship that I messed up. And so it's important that he knows that that came from me and why it came from me, the dysfunction that led to that, so he doesn't make those same mistakes, basically, when he grows up and gets into relationships. And just laying those things out there, you have to. It's so important because your kids, you see this in churches too, right? When we go to church and we're dealing with a pastor, we have a tendency to put pastors and our parents, even in politics, with presidents, there are certain people that will put these people on a pedestal as if they are a god. The problem is, what happens when those people fall short? What happens when those people disappoint you? What happens when you wake up and realize that those people are flawed? Suddenly things come crashing down in a way that you lose faith, and you really shouldn't. You just have to understand the human condition. And so I try to make it clear, I'm no god. I'm nowhere near Jesus. I'm a human, and I make a lot of mistakes on a regular basis. I still do. I'm smarter now, so maybe I make less mistakes, or maybe I just make different mistakes. But it's important that our kids know that truth about us.
Yeah, it is important. And for them to understand that, like you said, nobody's perfect, but children do look, and children do, it's don't do as I say, do as I
Do
do.
as I do, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But children, you can tell them something, but they're going to follow your example. So
Yeah.
if you're open, if you communicate, well, they're going to reciprocate and do the same. So this has improved your relationship with your children. So what would you tell a parent that is right now struggling with a child? The child doesn't want to talk to them, is quiet, wants to hide in their room. What would you say to them, and what would you say to the child?
Love, love as much as you can. If you wanted to research, 1 Corinthians 13 in the Bible is the love chapter, and it literally explains what love is. You've heard it, I'm sure. Love is patient, love is kind, that whole thing. There's an idea of, if I do something, but I'm not, if I do something and there's no love in it, no godly sacrificial love in it, then it's just a waste. It's a clanging cymbal. It's just noise. If I'm speaking, but I'm not speaking from a place of godly love, then I'm just a clanging cymbal. So it gives you this picture that without love, it's not pleasing, it's not helpful, it's not transformative. Love is transformative. When you truly love someone and you sacrifice your desires to focus on them and to help them become all that they can be, there's a place that opens up. Along with that is discipline. Discipline is important because discipline is a reflection of love. I'm not disciplining you because you're annoying or because I don't like you. I'm disciplining you because I love you and I care about you and I don't want anything to happen to you. So you have to engage in their world, know what their world is, make yourself aware, and then be intentional to engage in it as much as you can. Yeah, we have to work, we have to pay bills, we have to put food on the table. But and I was just thinking about this too. This is really because I'm in this process of trying to establish family business, and trying to create legacy and stuff that I can leave to my kids. But in that process, it's made me so busy that, I'm coming off of maybe not being there as much as I need to be. So it's this constant self-awareness that's taking place, and it never stops. It'll continue on for, until I'm not here anymore. So you're just engaging and being very intentional.
Yes, and I want to thank you guys for watching. Let us know where you're from. If you have any questions for either me or Brandon, just let us know. And we're happy that you guys are here with us. But Brandon, what you said is true, because a lot of parents think, well, I'm paying the bills, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But sometimes it doesn't feel like it's either a sacrifice or that they're really doing it for their children, because you gotta work and pay the bills anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you say that you can show your child, I guess, real true vulnerability, quality, and, like you said, unconditional love, as opposed to just doing what you gotta do, going through the motions, so that everyone can understand what that really looks like?
Time, time. Spend time, have the conversations, plan things, make time. If you have multiple kids, you might even need to kind of set aside time for each one, given that they might have different personalities and drives and focuses, and being intentional and having conversations, see where they are, checking with them, open up, um, constant. Love, affirmation, confirmation. I'm here for you. All those kinds of things. You have to make a plan to do those things regularly and often.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for a child, a parent that has a child that the child is being distant or something, and some parents do say, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
How does it seep through? How does it seep through? How can you get to your child? How is it that you were able to get to your child, for those that are having a more difficult time?
I think when you're consistent, um, the idea of loving people is not something that happens in a moment, but it's many moments over time, and you have to patiently endure, and just not have an expectation for what you're going to get out of it. And really, we should treat all relationships like that. Not have an expectation for what you're going to get out of it, but just focus on who you are and what you can bring to it. And when you love people like that, there's something extraordinary that takes place in that kind of realm of loving someone unconditionally and consistently, that they see the effort, and it gets through. The thing that you have to understand is when you love, you're not loving for the result, you're just loving because it's what you should do. And sometimes the result doesn't happen, it happens down the line. For me, I very specifically remember my mom loved me in the best ways that she could. Doesn't mean that that it wasn't sometimes, it didn't feel good, but I know she tried in the way that she could. There was one moment I remember, I was in the military, in my 20s, and I'd seen another soldier who had gotten in trouble, and it was just something very silly that he did that he didn't need to do, got in trouble, and it was one of those things that I was like, wow, I had to call my mom, and I called her and I said, you know what, I really appreciate this thing that you did for me, the way that you disciplined me, the way that you spoke to me, because I see how it's helped me to stay out of trouble this way, now that I'm living on my own. And so we have to understand that you may not always, sometimes your kids will be closed off to you. You may not always see those results right away, but you just keep doing it anyway. That's the way that love works. So, really, really pushing that, and pushing that, and just show that you're there for them without trying to get any result from it specifically, and it'll come back to you at some point for sure.
Yeah, and that you said about discipline is so true, because a lot of parents want to have a relationship with their children, and so it gets confused, the role between either being the friend or the parent sometimes gets a little confused, and some
Mhm.
parents are afraid to impose certain restrictions or to force their children to do something that maybe is good for them and they don't want to do it. Like, for example, getting them off that video game, or maybe, restricting that thing that they want, or making them take a class or read a book or pursue something that they don't
Hmm.
feel like doing because they're afraid they're just going to push that child away more.
Right.
But what we have to understand is that as adults, because of our experience and because of what we know, we have to show them the way. This is the time that they learn. If
Hmm.
we just act as their friend, well, they have enough friends at school. They actually need someone who teaches them the right way, but like you said, with that nurturing, so that they feel safe and that they understand that, yes, I'm going to have to do some things that are uncomfortable, some things that maybe I don't feel like doing, but are
Right.
good for me, because this is how, we can't expect for our children at 18 to be driven, to be disciplined, to have self control, right? To have
Right.
all these correct, to be resilient and to be courageous, if every time that they, decide to take a class or start a hobby, and then it gets a little hard and they're like, Mom, I want to quit. And you're like, okay, it's okay, baby, it's okay. And you let them. If, they keep on walking away from their commitments, if they're not
Right.
doing good in their assignments, and then you just baby them, well, how do you think that they're going to be the adults that they need to be to get on out in the real world?
Right. And also, think of it from a position of validation. Validation is so key. It's part of the reason why we're trying to fill up on these different things that often aren't fulfilling, is because we're trying to find validation. And you can even put yourself in that perspective.
Yes.
So right now we have a lot of issues in our country, and many people just want to be seen, right? So as a black man, it is nice when someone says, you know what, I understand that black people have been through a struggle in this nation, and I see you. As a female, it does make you feel validated when if a man were to come and say, you know what, I understand that women have it tough in this country, and men, we often don't treat women with enough respect and as equals, that kind of thing. That's validation. And so if that even makes us feel good as adults, imagine what that does for a young person, to feel seen and to feel like their existence means something. We all want purpose. It doesn't matter. That never goes away. You will seek purpose at 4, 14, and 40. So that the age doesn't matter. We all want really the same things. It's to be happy and to be seen, to be validated, and to know, well, if I'm here and I'm alive, that must mean something, right? And so, if we can offer that to our kids and we can offer that to others, that's what we should do.
Exactly. And once again, going back to purpose, because I mean, the title is From Pleasure to Passion, right?
Right.
It's finding a way of living a life with purpose. And once again, for those of you that are watching, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in Buddha, whether you believe in source energy, in a way, we are speaking of the same thing, okay? Because we're spirit beings, and we live in a universe that is guiding us. And when we do the right things, you will see that things open up to you and you find abundance in your life. But it is, once again, having that direction, that purpose. And that is something that you instill in your children. And have you seen a difference in your children from yourself, and being able to teach your son to live a life with purpose, as opposed to when you yourself were younger and had really no direction in life?
Funny too. I think my daughter might have just woke up. I heard the bedroom door open. Um, yeah, definitely, definitely. There's an opening up. You see that vulnerability start to break on their side too, the kid's side, where they are expressing more and being open about their struggles more, and seeking advice. Hey, I have this question, I have this thing I was wondering about, can you help me with this? And that's a major change, is when they start to come to you and not go to YouTube, or go to the points of addiction for filling that void. But now they're looking to you to find answers and to find ways to grow, and that's where I'm seeing the change.
Yeah, and it's important because I know that right now, well, especially with COVID, but even before COVID, I've been looking at the researches that have been done online, and basically, 1 out of 5 American teens, ages 12 to 25, commit suicide every year.
That's
Guys,
crazy.
the numbers are alarming. That means that on a day like today, anywhere from 4 to 6 youth in the United States are going
Yeah.
to take away their own life.
We,
So,
we have a special guest. I'm sorry.
yes,
You see
yes.
the little one here? Can you say hello, baby?
Hi.
I'll say.
Hi, baby. And then
Yeah,
not
it's
only
relax.
70% of our youth are on some form of medication. Hey, how are you? So it's a big deal and a big way to be able to relieve this, because sometimes we try to treat the actual symptom by treating maybe the anxiety or treating the depression with either a pill with a treatment. But when you treat it as a life thing, for example, giving your child a direction, giving your child a purpose, having him find something that gets him motivated, that gets him excited about his day, will actually help all those other aspects. And you know what you said about validation? Did you know that validation is the biggest suffering the world has right now? All of
Ab-
us, adults and
Right.
children, we are all seeking validation. We are validation seeking creatures.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we were designed that way. There's it's something in the makeup that God gave us. Yeah. Okay. Watch yourself, baby. It's something. It's in the way that God designed us, but it's meant to be connected to Him and not to false things that are unfulfilling. And it's just such an important thing. I think that's the grassroots of any movement that you're going to make to try to heal humanity is in speaking to the issue of validation. And that's why it's so vital that God calls us to love each other sacrificially. Second, and saying that doesn't mean that I have to, it's not literally I'm gonna go and die on a cross like Jesus did, right? But he did that, and that's a part of the, and that's how we're saved. But now that I know that he did that for me, I can now love other people sacrificially in a similar way to say, okay, well, maybe I'd rather I have money in my pocket. Maybe I want to go spend it on myself, but in this case, maybe I don't, and I use that to help someone. I, give that to a homeless person, or as a way of loving them. And there just is no greater way to validate someone than to love. And love isn't always money, but it's time, it's investment. And when you invest in people who feel unseen, that's where transformation begins. That's where you begin to.
Yeah. And validation, it's because of it goes back, and we will end it like this, talking about relationships. Okay. Relationships are the cornerstone of humanity, of society. It is the most
Absolutely.
important thing. And any of you guys watching, remember the last breakup you had. I'm sure you didn't eat for a couple of days. So obviously relationships are more meaningful and filling to us than even food sometimes. We need them to survive. And everything in our lives is based on a relationship. I don't even care if it's with the mailman.
Yeah.
That's a relationship. Everything that we have to do is based on relationships. And because of that, and because of the fact that of the way we're built as machines, as our bodies, as our brains, we have the mirror neurons. So basically we learn and we experience and we feel things through our relationships with others, through seeing ourselves in the eyes of others. Now, the little problem that happens here is because we're so unaware that we become addicted to the validation of needing to see ourselves through others, that then we chase these relationships, these behavior, and we get into these addictive behaviors. And it
Mm-hmm.
goes back to, once again, cultivating the number one relationship that you should have, and that is having a relationship with yourself. And you're able to establish that relationship with yourself, whether it's developing it through, through God, whether it's developing it through another practice, but it is having a practice that helps you begin to ask yourself those questions that you need to ask yourself, so that you can look within and find that self-love, find that strength, find the talent, find the ability, find everything that you want out there, and find it in here. and then you will solve every other problem. I promise you. I absolutely promise you. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's just so important. Um, I believe we spoke before about, and I would say I would reiterate actually because you mentioned relationships being so important. I think that's vital. I think the quality of your relationships really will help to determine the quality of your life,
Yeah.
plain and simple. And everything happens there. Confirmation, validation, our growth. I've heard this quote before that if God wants to bless your life, he'll send a person into your life. If the devil wants to block your life, then he'll send a person into your life. And that just speaks to healthy relationships and how they enhance who you are and where you're headed, and how negative relationships can be detrimental to that and hinder that. So it's really so important. But that always comes back to love. Always comes back to love, because that's the foundation of a healthy relationship. People don't realize that you can one that God has shown that's impactful in that, what I was talking about, 1 Corinthians 13. It's the same type of love that's used throughout that whole verse. So if you ever study the Greek language, there's multiple words for love.
Yeah.
Because in English, the word love is the same as, like, I love French fries as I love my wife. It's just the same word.
Yes.
Clearly, I love one of those things more.
Yes.
But in Greek, there are multiple words for love,
Mhm.
and agape love is one that
Oh
is
my God.
godly.
Yes.
Yeah, agape love is
Yes.
is the love that is godly and sacrificial. I have to have a relationship with God to understand that. He shows me that, and then I can give it out to the rest of the world.
Yes.
And I'm supposed to love everybody with that same godly sacrificial love. People think that that's weird, because you would normally only, you're not gonna. We think of loving our spouse as different from the way that we love the guy down at the corner store, and it's from the same foundation. It's not the love that changes. It's just the intimacy that changes. My wife is going to know more about me than the guy down at the corner store. We share different, more information. So that agape love, as the core of our love in every relationship that we encounter, is what fosters such healthy, um, healthy, functional relationships. And you see it out in the world, because if we were loving each other in that godly way, there wouldn't be so much chaos, plain and simple.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's absolutely the most important aspect of our living in this world peacefully and in balance, in harmony with other people.
Yes. And what he said about amor agape, and I know this very well because I studied this for many, many years. So amor agape, it is a sacrificial love. And when you think
Mhm.
about it, when we were talking about all of this stemming from within, we even have to love ourselves with this same love. Because being good to ourselves, loving ourselves, doesn't mean giving into our every whim, into our every
Mhm.
pleasure,
Mhm.
into our every desire. Okay, it means loving with discipline and sacrifice, the same discipline that we use for our children, we have to use for ourselves. I know personally there's a lot of crazy stuff that I want to do and a lot of crazy stuff that I did. But now, did that really bring me the fulfillment or the life that I want? Is it really building and solidifying the relationships that I have with others or myself? Like you said, that amor agape will bring you a greater quality of life. So loving yourself might mean not putting that hamburger in your mouth, like you said, and maybe going for a walk. It takes sacrifice. That same sacrifice that you're going to need to use for your children, that same sacrifice that you're going to need to use for your lover, for your partner. It means, not cheating on them. Yeah, that person's attractive. Sure, I'm attracted to them, but what does that mean? Why do I sacrifice? Because of the depthness and the richness, not only of the relationship, but the richness that it will add to your life. I want to thank you so much, Brandon, for joining me this hour. And I want to thank you guys so much for listening to us. I hope you guys took notes. And once again, if you guys have any questions or anything, let us know. Brandon and I would be more than happy to answer you. And in a little while, I will be posting a link to a book for those parents and children who want to start developing these skills of self-awareness and want to find what it is that your passion, your purpose is, I will be giving you guys a link to a free workbook, and it will help you get started on the right path. And without that, well, without further ado, guys, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you have had a fantastic week. This is the first week of the year. I hope you guys have written goals down and you are working towards those goals, and don't give up. Don't give up. It's too early, and we want to have a better year than last year. So have a fantastic day. We will see you guys soon.